Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're going to talk about new thinking to create a new era for infrastructure delivery. Now, by the time you hear this podcast, the dust will have settled on the general election, and we'll know the rough direction in which the UK is set to take for the next 5 years. But as it stands right now, all we can really say for certain is that whoever's in Downing Street, they will have infrastructure high on their list of key drivers and key levers to really drive the economy. And given the state of the public finances, they'll also be looking to the construction sector to really come up with some pretty radical new ways to start to turn the tide of poor productivity and to embrace new thinking to boost economic, social and environmental outcomes created from every single penny of public cash spent, which means that now, perhaps more than at any time in the last 30 years, as an industry, construction and infrastructure has to change. We have to be more effective, more productive and frankly, more modern. So what does that mean in reality? How does a hugely traditional and culturally slow to change industry transform itself? How does the sector convince the next administration that every public pound spent with it will be rewarded in terms of driving much sought after economic and social growth? Well, tricky question, so let's ask an expert. We're welcoming Andy Beard, the new Managing Director for Infrastructure at global construction firm Mace, to the podcast today. Andy, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. Pleasure to be here.
Well, Andy, given that it's general election week, let's start with politics. We're talking today about change and new thinking to transform the infrastructure delivery. Obviously, we don't yet know the outcome of the election, but what are you hoping for in terms of any new administration's focus and support for the sector?
Well, I think given some of the uncertainty over the last few years, we really need a new administration to get on with it without any sort of pontification. So what that looks like is really an agreed and funded pipeline of economic and social infrastructure for the next 10 years, which is importantly funded, it's regularly reviewed and it's regularly updated. But really, we want this administration to commit, again, long-term plans and let the nation get building.
Right, well, I talked about the role that infrastructure can play in driving growth and that all parties seek. Do you think that politicians really understand that? Or do they just see projects really as ribbons to cut?
Yeah, I don't think it's quite that bleak, Anthony, actually. I genuinely think that they recognise the opportunities that big infrastructure programs provide for economic growth. And that's one of the levers that they all have to prevent the need to increase taxes. And growth is a really, really key part of what I see in some of the manifestos that I've read. So again, how do you build skills? How do you build that economic development? But also the long-term benefits that these all bring, right? So it brings jobs, it brings skills. Obviously, it gets the nation building, but also those long-term benefits to improve connectivity, improve resilience, increase mobility, and ultimately productivity for the nation.
So was there anything in any of the party manifestos around, say, planning reform or financing that you think could actually radically help to change the way that UK infrastructure is delivered?
So I'm not sure about radical change. But when you think about planning, there's probably been several administrations now that have, sort of committed or pledged to tackle planning, and it's never really happened. However, what I do feel is in the national planning policy framework, there is opportunities to make some tweaks around that to kind of really help certain local schemes or whatever else. And I guess that there is always this balance between devolution of power, to really sort of get things done, and then it's sort of juxtaposition of kind of a central management of the overall. So I would expect there to be a leveraging and tweaks made to that planning policy framework. And then I guess on the financing side, we have to leverage wherever possible private investment, right? Private investment and financing. Only so much will come from the public purse, and where it's good value to do so, we need to make that happen. So I guess looking for things like how certain previous administrations have made price points and price settlements on energy to enable kind of offshore wind and that sort of renewable energy transition really sort of flourish. That's what we need to look for in the future.
Yeah. I mean, some might say that you couldn't get much of a cigarette paper between a lot of the policies around that area because everyone's trying to streamline the planning. Everyone's trying to lever in more private cash. So, you've taken up the role of MD for infrastructure at Mace. I mean, where do you think the key areas of investment will be over the next 5 years? I mean, are there specific sectors that you have your eye on as potential growth sectors for Mace over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think when you look at this through the lens of the consumer, you look at aviation. Actually, we're now back to kind of record passenger numbers, which is absolutely fantastic for the kind of mobility and connectivity. You've got some real scrutiny on water and environment and pollution, and I guess then that drives record investment in AMP8 in the water sector. You've got the new kind of need or maybe recognition for energy security and resilience, again, which kind of manifests itself into some real investment in that sector. And then I guess, you've got the defence side of things. Security has now become a real issue. The world seems a less stable place. And again, it's great to see that the levels of investment are going back into the defence sector. So from all of the sectors that my role covers in terms of infrastructure, there's some real positive signs of progress and certainly investment.
Yeah. I mean, you say that you're passionate about new and innovative ways of delivery. How does that passion manifest itself, and what examples, I suppose, stand out to you of the kind of innovation that you are kind of talking about and you have in mind for bringing to play at Mace?
Well, I think when you look at the current kind of track record of construction, particularly in the UK, actually, when you put it on a global stage, a lot of countries look to the UK for their know-how. Right. The reality is the reputation of the construction industry desperately needs to change if we're going to attract the right kind of skills and capabilities to the industry. I guess and of course the track record in the UK, when you look at some of the promises which have been made on time and budget, are often broken. So something needs to change with that within that mix. And I guess the sustainability angle as well is a potential catalyst. So I look back to things like the Epham and Latham reports, right? And when you look at Project 13, there's been so many publications that talk around alternative delivery models. And I guess that's the sort of innovation, if you like, that I'm kind of pointing to. How do those alternative delivery models, those more collaborative models, actually unlock engagement with supply chain, engagement with suppliers to actually bring more innovation to the industry? Yeah.
Because you use a phrase on your CV describing yourself as a strategic thinker capable of delivering the transition to sustainability, digital product development and innovation. I mean, what in practice does that transition look like? I mean, is your vision, for example, factory prefabrication or a world of retrofitting existing stock? Development of new low carbon materials. I mean, how do you see the future, Andy?
Yeah, I think it includes probably all of those things, Anthony, actually, if we're brutally honest. This is a really, really complex challenge and there's a lot going on. But perhaps that challenge is going to bring the best out of industry. And I think for me, it does start with leadership, right? It starts with leadership in our clients. It starts with leadership from supply chain, from consultant, from designers. And again, we've got potential, the opportunity here for, say, digitalisation to unlock some of the skills and capacity shortages which have been talked about for years.
Yeah.
Productivity, again, is something that the industry is trying to tackle for a long time and made relatively slow progress. And of course, we've now got the climate and sort of sustainability emergency. So the time is now. And I guess the reason that I'm sort of passionate and promotion of this is I find myself in a position where we talk to a number of different clients, we talk to a number of different suppliers, and unless we're able to put it right at the top of the agenda, to shape thinking and shape the strategy about how big programs are delivered, then it will just get lost in the status quo.
I mean, you say it's been talked about. You referenced the Latham and Egan. It's 30 years ago that we had Latham, and regardless of who is in Downing Street, the question still remains. What does industry, working of course with government, have to do to drive forward those vital innovations and speed up infrastructure delivery in the way that Latham talked about it, in the way that Egan talked about it, and where that so many people have talked about it over the last 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the government have a real opportunity to lay out a long-term plan and really provide confidence to industry that it's there to be delivered. That confidence there is something that businesses can make decisions on to make commitments and investments of their own. So I do think the economies of scale, if you like, that the government has and their ability to kind of join up some of these dots. We have a great habit of reinventing the wheel in the construction industry. And that starts with how clients may approach models. So we've got things like Project 13 and other sort of publications where there's actually quite a clear blueprint on what good looks like and the key ingredients. But it's amazing how many clients sort of overlook that. And then when you think about all of the things that need to be delivered, how can we get to that more product mindset? How can we get to a kit of parts, a repeatable solution that can be used in defence, it can be used in Ministry of Justice and prisons program, how it can be used in other sectors as well. That's ultimately how we're going to start to unlock some of these things, and by doing so, actually make all of the suppliers within industry probably more productive and therefore more profitable. Okay,
well, let's talk a bit about Mace, because Mace has been quite central in trying to drive some of these ideas. Mace has just been through a fairly radical reorganisation with Mark Reynolds about to step down as CEO and chair, or focus on chairing the company, with Jason Millett, who is set to become chief executive in January. How would you describe this change?
I probably described it as well planned, actually, Anthony. I generally would, because I don't think this is sort of new in the coming, if you like. This has been through the effective use of succession planning, and again, we're very lucky that Mark kind of retains a very prominent role in the organisation as chair in January 25, and of course Jason, that's been leading our consult business very, very successfully, but also has a very strong construction background, now comes in as CEO of Group, actually. So, from a leadership standpoint within the organisation, we're very positive that we've got something which is a bit new, but we've also got the stability that carries us forward. And equal to Mace is our voice in market. Right, so making sure that actually, whilst this is about internal changes and moves, that this is very much something that we want to ensure that our brand and our image is out there in industry and serving clients.
Mark has been highly influential in terms of leading and growing the business through investment in innovation and new ideas, and I imagine that will continue. But he's also been really quite influential in trying to reform the whole industry. Why is that so important to a business like Mace?
Well, I think you start to see some of the real kind of passion come through, actually, about the care for industry. We see that there's probably quite a few things which could be better, and we take a very stark responsibility that we've got a role to play alongside the rest of industry to do something about it. It's very easy to sort of point and critique. It's less easy to get on the pitch and actually do something about it. And that kind of comes back to probably the purpose of Mace, which is to redefine the boundaries of ambition. And it is very much part of our DNA and culture to take kind of calculated risk, to push the boundaries, to do something different. Otherwise, nothing will change, Anthony, essentially. So
yeah. Well, I've followed Mace's progress, and it's been transforming the building delivery process through its investment in off-site and prefabricated components, the factory construction, etc. But how does that translate into the world of infrastructure, which is, maybe slightly more involved in linear projects, slightly different kind of setups on those projects?
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And I think when you come back to the kind of previous point around economies of scale and the ability to join dots, actually you'll probably find that there are more common components across all of these infrastructure assets, albeit you might not ordinarily think so. But I'll just give you a couple of examples of maybe sort of the program or project level examples. So we've recently delivered at Manchester Airport. We've constructed on site a 10 metre tall, 2-storey, 216-ton bridge that was driven into its final location. Yeah. Now, what that did was reduce disruption. It opened up another kind of construction work phase, if you like, for operatives to work more safely. Now, that's one example where we've increased productivity. We've delivered a great solution that's reduced disruption. It's saved carbon. But actually, when you think about how many airports there are across Europe and across the world, how does that solution become more of a product, which is then incorporated into new designs? So how can we use, say an air bridge which might be manufactured by a global entity? The construction environment is normally fitted around that product. Yeah. And that's the switch in the mindset that I think we've got to get to from an infrastructure standpoint. What are the reusable products that we can incorporate into future design solutions?
And I suppose part of that whole process is the way that you work with the whole supply chain, which I suppose brings me to something which you've pioneered, which you call the delivery partner model, which is essentially, as far as I know, it encourages all parties, to the contract to share information and collaborate from day one, and you say founded on trust, fairness and transparency. How does that approach differ from other approaches? Why does your form of collaboration work when others fail?
Yeah, it's they're remarkably basic words, aren't they? Actually, trust, fairness, transparency, and perhaps sometimes this.
Well, we've been trying it for a long while. Everyone's been trying it for a long while.
The reality about the delivery partner is it's evolved. Actually, it's not been one size fits all, but there has been sort of steadfast elements to it, which kind of brings a consistency and learning from the past. But it enables a degree of agility and flex for the said environment. Now, again, previous comments acknowledge we need to be more consistent and standard and repeatable, but we do recognise that every environment and context is slightly and subtly different. So the delivery partner has definitely evolved, but it has to be flexible. We want to be outcome focused. We want to skin in the game and all that sort of stuff around the delivery of a positive outcome. But some of the stuff in the middle is really complex, right? And it needs a slightly more agile and flexible approach. So we foster that kind of collaborative effort, the real kind of open book, the transparency, and it's worked really, really well, right? The track record kind of speaks for itself. And I guess our promotion of that really is to make sure that the construction industry continues with its transition to be a more appealing industry for people, more collaborative, less adversarial, and more focused on outcomes.
And of course, that goes beyond just the remit of the UK, because when I spoke to Mark Reynolds on the podcast about a year ago, now it dawned on me, I don't know why I didn't realise, but Mace is a huge organisation now, over 2 billion revenues, and it's global. What lessons can you draw from these other major programs of the world, or is it the other way? What lessons are you exporting?
We're doing rather well actually. We've landed some very significant programs in pretty much all of our hubs, from Asia to Middle East to things like Hudson in the Americas. And the reality is, we promote ourselves as very, very proud British organisation, but with a global and kind of international outlook. So the reality is, Anthony, we are learning from the different cultures and the different environments that we're working in overseas. But we're also really promoting some of the very best of construction industry from London. And actually, one of the things that is really appealing to clients at the moment is this delivery focused. So we're consultants, but actually the DNA is really about problem solving and delivery of outcomes. So, we're getting away from those PowerPoints and strategies to actually how to get stuff done. Particularly prevalent in the sustainability lens. I think that most clients have kind of been through they've got a strategy, they've got a plan. Now they've actually got to get on with it and do it. And actually things like what we call construction to production, which is essentially modern methods of construction. But all of that learning from our construction business, we've been there, we've done it, we're out in the field. That's really resonating with a lot of these big programs in the UK and overseas.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a bit more about you, Andy. You describe yourself in your CV as being a Gen Y leader who brings a different and compelling attitude towards change and industry transformation. I mean, you've been managing director for infrastructure at Mace since May this year. What's the aim of the role, and how does this focus that you have on bringing more diverse thought to the teams you work with? How does that play to the new role?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very sort of lucky, and I'm really quite sort of humble, and I fully recognise that I've led teams when I was sort of 30. I was born in 1983, which makes me a millennial, I think. And I think it's just really important that I've been part of big programs, and I've worked with some fantastic people, but I think you've got to bring a very sort of authentic leadership style to work, and recognise that the people we're trying to attract into the industry, are different, right? They've come from a very different sort of background and walk of life and upbringing and education than maybe some others in industry. But how do we make sure that everyone feels included, and we leverage from all of that kind of years experience? So I guess that's the point I'm sort of making around the Gen Y piece.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's that cognitive diversity that we need in the room as well. So that diversity of thought, those differences of opinions, we will become far richer than that. So I guess the point I'm making is I'm not sort of the stereotypical kind of alpha male that we might have expected in construction industry. But the role as MD of infrastructure is really to start to join up a load of the dots, mainly around clients. Actually, I mean, our business is really to serve clients, to make sure that we deliver the outcomes to those clients. And what's kind of quite stark actually is that a lot of clients have very similar needs and challenges. They say it in a slightly different way. It's in a different context and environment, but a lot of them have the same sorts of challenges. And again, when you kind of roll that up and say, well, actually, how don't we reinvent the wheel, but how do we make sure that we use all that best practice in an efficient, effective way, in a good value for money offer? But how do we just then contextualize that with a wrapper, if you like, to make sure that it's going to add value in that context? That's really the bones of the role. Of course, we've got a lot of people that deserve great careers.
Yeah.
So some of the work that we're winning creates careers for our people, which is fantastic and rewarding.
But of course, you're not new to Mace. You spent the last 2 years as global leader for the cost and commercial practice group of Mace Consult. I mean, how does your new role differ? I presume it's more delivery focused.
Yeah, I'd say it's certainly more kind of client focused, operationally focused. Delivery for clients and delivery of operational performance for the business. And I guess how that differs to the previous role in cost and commercial. Well, cost and commercial was really about making sure that as one of our 4 service lines globally, that we are offering best practice. We have a standard product, we have the processes, procedures, we have the quality assurance, which underpins all of the delivery to those clients, if you like. So I always sort of see our 4 service lines, and we're quite simple in terms of our structure. We know what we're good at and we kind of stick to it. Those 4 service lines sort of go horizontally across all of our hubs. And then in the vertical, we take that best practice and we tailor it to respond to the specific client needs in those sectors.
Yeah. I mean, your background is 17 years with Arcadis, ended up as partner. I mean, how did that career develop? I presume you started life as a QS.
I did indeed, yeah. I joined EC Harris as a graduate. I become chartered and gradually sort of worked my way through. I spent some time in property, which was fantastic. It was really fantastic schemes in central London property market. The financial crisis hit in 2008, and I went to Gatwick actually for 5 years, which was fantastic to learn about different assets, baggage handling systems, the complexity of kind of airport and infrastructure environments. But it also really taught me about programs and actually, the importance of programs to deliver benefits and how programs are constructed and such like. And ever since that, I've had quite a track record in big infrastructure programs. So never really looked back from that point.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. I mean, apart from obviously this new role, I mean, what's the best thing about your career to date? What's your highlight?
Well, I mean, look, I've been really fortunate to have done a lot of travelling in the role, certainly in a previous role, and again, that's that doesn't come with every job, right? So that's definitely a perk when I look back. Would have thought actually when I started out would I have done that much travelling? Then probably not. So that's been great. But I think the real career highlight actually was we worked on the vendor due diligence for Thames Tideway, and it was one of these commissions which was very, very intense. It was highly critical, but it led to a fantastic outcome where investment was secured for that programme. And that actually led to winning the Management Consultant of the Year award for finance and risk management in 2016. So it's not every day you pick up an award. So that's probably the highlight of a professional career to date.
Congratulations! A bit late on that one, but congratulations anyway. You're talking to us today from the Central London Moorgate office of Mace, but I mean, what do you do in your life to take your mind off work? Then, what do you get up to?
Yeah, I try and stay pretty active. I like a bit of golf, some nice walks, a bit of gardening. But I've also got children, so I've against my better judgment have been hooked into coaching kids football. And even more than that, I've actually become chairman of the club. So we had this fantastic club, 250 plus boys and girls actually down near Bromley, and it's fantastic because it really takes your mind off of work. It's fantastic to give something back to the community and see actually boys and girls really flourish in a safe environment and develop. But it's time consuming but very, very rewarding, Anthony.
So obviously you're a football expert. So who's going to win the Euros 24 then? Can it be England?
Oh crikey! You know what? Absolutely, of course it can be England. It's coming.
There you go. Excellent. Well, meanwhile, back at the ranch, you said you worked on a rake of major projects and clients over the years: Gatwick Airport, Heathrow Airport, National Grid, Network Rail, Thames Water, Transport for London, for example. I mean, what can these major clients do to help businesses like Mace really start to turn the dial on industry transformation?
Yeah, I think the clients, they play a really important role in all of these things. And I think they have to recognise that role. They really need to bring some pretty strong leadership and create the right environment to get the best out of, designers, consultants, constructors, supply chain. And again, there is some guidance out there in industry that sort of sets blueprints to enable that. And I guess it's just quite remarkable how many times that is potentially overlooked. So, moving from I need a person or I need this capability to, how do I best answer this problem? How do I best achieve that outcome? What best practice can you bring from elsewhere that I can incorporate into this program is really, really important. If clients sort of recognize what they're really good at, what their core business is, and therefore what help they need from elsewhere, and they are willing to ask the right question, if you like, and not feel like they need to know all of the answers. I think that's a really important ingredient to kind of getting best from industry, because it's a real joint effort, and it's just timing, it's getting the right people around the table at the right time. So they have the real key responsibility to create the right environment to enable that to happen.
Of course, behind all of these cultural issues and these people issues, of course, there's a whole lot of new innovations coming through. One of which is digitisation. In your last role, you were global program leader for digitisation of services. I mean, how do you see the development of digital systems, data, really transforming construction, and how far behind the curve are we?
Yeah, I mean, it's so in that role back in 2018. We put a lot of effort because genuinely we had the view that we were going to be disrupted as an industry, and we were going to be disrupted very, very quickly. Now, fast forward 5 or 6 years, we've got through COVID. Actually, the level of disruption probably wasn't actually what we thought it was back at that time. That doesn't mean to say that it's not a real risk and indeed an opportunity. And when you think about the amount of skills and capability that we need in industry, actually, there's no real risk from increased productivity. It just means that actually we might do all the stuff that we need to do because we probably don't have the right people. So disruption hasn't gone away. I see it definitely as an opportunity. But we've got to kind of, I guess, recognise and clients and consultants, supply chain, got to recognise that we need new skills and we need some new sort of environment for these new skills to flourish within the industry. But construction is still deeply fragmented. And that fragmentation will always prevent that level of disruption from occurring quickly.
I mean, getting the right skills on board, of course, is a key issue for Mace as well as it is for many businesses across the sector. How do you ensure that Mace is the destination for the brightest and the best young talent? How do you ensure they're not put off by the reputation of the construction industry as old-fashioned, dirty, dangerous, and poorly paid?
That's right. We've got to work really hard at it, Anthony. That's the reality. And that's from grassroots. It's from apprentices. It's joiners. It's military. It's all kind of walks of life that we need to really kind of target. I talk from my own experience. I mean, construction industry is a fantastic destination for people, but again, some of the track record and the starkness of data would prove otherwise. So again, I think we've just got to keep telling that story. We've got to keep evolving, and companies like ourselves at Mace, we need to learn from others. We need to be looking at different industries and seeing how they work and adapting accordingly.
Yeah. Big challenges there for sure. But going back to the election, just to wrap up, I mean, all parties have been talking about infrastructure investment as key to driving the economy. What's your single bit of advice, Andy, or single ask of any incoming administration when it comes to encouraging that vital new thinking around infrastructure delivery?
Yeah, I'd probably come back to that kind of long-term commitment, which is funded. We need clarity, okay, because the industry can get behind, leaders in those organisations can get behind that, can get excited and start planning accordingly. So that's definitely one area that I would kind of point to and say, if you can give us that, yes, please.
It's that consistency in message.
Absolutely, and it has to be funded. It has to be funded. It has to be regularly updated. The good thing is there's plenty of tools that they have and plenty of reports, and thankfully, they've all been engaging. But they really do need to see this as an industry that can help. The stimulus can really help the growth and get the nation building.
And I suppose from an industry perspective, when I spoke to Mark Reynolds, say in the summer, I asked him why, that given that the sector has been trying to reform for 3 decades, he thought that now would be any different when it comes to embracing change and new ideas. Now, Andy, you're young, you're open-minded, you're passionate. Why do you think that this is going to be the right moment for change?
I just think we've got some added complexity now, and I'd like to think that complexity will bring the best out of thinking. right, and solutions. So when you think about the opportunities for digitalization, but you've got sustainability, which is this complete new kind of currency and vocabulary which is coming in, which is playing such a heavy role, we really must make sure that is the catalyst for change, or the ongoing catalyst for change. So again, I think you've got a few things which are coming right at this moment in time, and actually 2030 is really not far away. 2035 a little bit further away, but we are in the window of now delivery. This has gone way past the papers and the strategies and the kick it down the road. If we don't do something in the next 6 years or whatever, these milestones and these targets that we've set will just be completely blown out of water.
Well, I feel confident there's new, really passionate and talented people like yourself coming in to really take over the baton and really drive forward, Andy. So thanks so much for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast. It's a huge, really important challenges, but good luck with it all.
Great. Thanks for having me, Anthony. And look forward to hearing it back.
Great stuff. Thanks, Andy. That's all we've got time for today, but we've got more from the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us, and thanks again to Andy. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.